well, we'll go ahead and get settled. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out to the Stanley Museum of Art's Levitt Lecture with Sandra Sawatzky. I'm Kimberly Datchick. I don't want to blow out the speakers. I can't make it louder. We've done that before. All right, so I will speak as loud as I can. Hopefully you can all hear. It's one of the limits of our space. Beautiful, but sometimes challenging. So welcome to the Levitt Lecture with Sandra Sawatzky. Tonight's program will include an artist talk by Sandra, followed by a conversation with Sandra and UI faculty, Tyler Priest and Hope Tucker, along with the Stanley's senior visiting curator of modern and contemporary art, Diana Tuite. Sandra grew up on the prairie of Alberta, Canada, and she's had a lot of different careers. She's worked in film as a writer, producer, and director. She's taught fashion design, and most recently, she's embarked on large-scale embroidery projects. These projects confront some of the most pressing issues of our time, including oil, climate change, sustainability, and how humans adapt to these crises that they've made. Her Black Gold Tapestry is on view on the second floor and will be up through June. It took over 9 years to create. It's a 220-foot masterpiece on the history of oil. Sandra's an extraordinary storyteller and thorough researcher. She examined artifacts, looked at the colors that were available to different civilizations throughout history, and consulted with experts in diverse fields. Her second project, The Age of Uncertainty, is a graphic novel meets illuminated manuscript. It took 4 years to create and was unveiled in February 2022 at Nichols Galleries in Calgary, Alberta. And it considers how humans' need for consumption, need for more, for power, for status, brushes up against our resources and our energy. And her current project, Back to the Garden, is one that she describes as an altarpiece to nature. And it focuses on the cosmic truth that all of creation is stardust. Please join me in welcoming Sandra Sawatzky.
I wasn't quite trained on this computer. Where's the little button where I move my slides? I'm not wearing my glasses. There, and when I, like right here? Okay. Okay, there I am. Okay. Black Gold Tapestry, that's my little logo that you could see. Oh, I have to be really close. Maybe I'm gonna hold it. Is that better? Is this better? Okay. The Black Gold Tapestry, that's my logo that I have on my website. And I'm going to just tell you, this is like I'm trying to make this a short talk, 20 minutes, so that we can get into the conversation. But I started this project in 2008, and as you were told, it took me 9 years to complete. And I finished it in time for Canada's 150th anniversary, and its first showing was at the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, Alberta. And it's our biggest museum in Calgary. And I think it's the biggest museum in, well, not quite in Alberta. There's another one. But it's both an art gallery and a museum. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about, first I'll just say that it's been on the road since I completed the work. The picture in the bottom left is where it was displayed first in Calgary, and the work was stretched on large wooden stretchers. And I was told by the curators there that you can't do that anymore, but that's fine. I came up with a new way to show it, and I quite prefer that way because it allows the fabric to go around the room, and so you can see that it's a tactile, flexible material. So my story begins that I went to art college, I went to film school, and the things that I've been most passionate about are storytelling, and textiles has always been woven within my story. Um, I worked for a while as an instructor right after I finished film school. There were no jobs in the film industry, and I had to make some money because I was going to put my husband through school. He had spent 6 years putting me through school, so now it was his turn. So I worked at a fashion college. It was just a tiny little college. It wasn't going to, it was like a 6-month program, but I learned a lot. I started off teaching fashion illustration, but then they needed somebody to teach textiles and history of costume, apparel design, sewing, and so I had to train myself up to teach those things. So I was always a little ahead that first semester. I was just a little further ahead than they were. And then I worked for, in 1991, I started working for a company that made commercials and training videos, and it was part of CTV, which was one of our national broadcasters. And I started off as a production assistant, and then over time I started working for another company, and I started making my own films during this time. And what I think initially, while I was working, I was thinking I'm going to make a feature film because that's what you're all supposed to do. But what it ended up is I figured out I should do something small and doable, and that's become my my mantra. Is that anything you do has to be done one little tiny step at a time, and you can have the big vision of what you want to complete, but do it in small. So one of my most successful films was a short film called Belly Boat Hustle, and you can see a photograph of it in the middle there. And what I loved about it is that it was a choreographed story. It doesn't have any dialogue. It's fly fishing, and it's very funny, and and it was also an environmental film. And I was also kind of riffing on how technology was taking over even those quiet places. So there, all these 5 men go to fly fish in this beautiful pond on a beautiful day, and they just can't leave their technology behind. I made it in 1998, and that the phone was already, you know, glued to the ear. Now it's here, but there, back then it was right there. So it was a really fun film to make, and it traveled for about 11 years, which a 5-minute film from Canada traveling that long and being in demand from all these different kind of festivals was unusual, but it taught me that you can capture a number of audiences if you kind of find that sweet spot of subject matter. So then I thought, well, if people like choreographed films without any dialogue, they would love a 80-minute film telling the story of a girl who marries a ghost. And I did everything that could go right in the development went right, and everything that could go wrong in the process of making it. And then as soon as I completed it, my distributor in Quebec went belly up. And so it was a very 4 years and a lot of labor and constant. It was a really beautiful idea, and lots of good things happened out of it. But I decided that I was not as happy working with large groups of people, and and going far away. And I had a 5-year-old daughter. When I was making that film, when I was doing all the development for it, I was doing it while I was working full time. I had a young daughter, and something had to give, and I guess it was me. So as I said, and you know, you're only as good as your weakest link, and I think I was the weakest link when it came down to I had just expended all my energy getting to the place where I would shoot, and then I wasn't quite prepared for all the things that would go wrong during the shoot. So in 2007, I'm still writing scripts, I'm still developing them, I'm still getting some funding, but I can see that the world is changing, and the theaters are becoming less filled with people to watch movies. People are even not watching it on television, and this whole thing of the now how we see films and movies and television has changed. The platforms have changed. So I'm in this kind of like in this place where I don't know where I'm going to go, and I go to the Glenbow Museum with my daughter and her friend. They're 10 years old, and we see this show of beautiful embroidery made by just ordinary women, settlers, pioneers, from about 80 years before. And there's a room off to the side, the discovery room, where families, kids can do a craft. So we all did embroidery that day, and I hadn't embroidered since I was 16. I'd made lots of clothes, and I had done a lot of finishing. This is a dress I made, and I knew how to sew with my thread and needle, and I learned to do 4 stitches: a outline stitch, a cross stitch, a satin stitch, and a chain stitch. And I was so compelled by it that I felt, oh, I've got all these sketches I do in my every day in my sketchbook, and I have a tiny bit of thread in my sewing basket. I'm going to start embroidering these figures, and I'll make bookmarks for my friends for Christmas. And then I did about 5 of them, and I was suddenly like, oh, I could make an epic film on cloth. And it's true. Like, I just like, what an egotist. It was sort of like, I think I could do this. I could make a movie. I'm never going to be able to raise millions of dollars, but I could raise thousands of dollars and buy fabric and thread and tell this magnificent story. And I knew that I could, because I knew that the Bayeux Tapestry was what put it into my head. And it's 1,000 years old. It will be on display in Britain, in London, this fall for 10 months. It usually is in Normandy, and it has its own museum, and about 500,000 people go to see it every year. Lots of school kids, lots of like people of all ages, and you get hustled through with a little device listening to the story, but it's so compelling. And so I riffed off of that tapestry, thinking that number one, create a story that's worth telling, that it's going to have ramifications in the same way that the Battle of Hastings, all the events that led up to and the aftermath, changed the course of history for the people in Britain as well as other parts of the world. And so what is that story that I could tell? And I would use the elements, the design elements, to create it, because I thought it's so beautiful, all that white space. It's kind of has a modern sense, and I love the bestiary in the marginalia, and the stitches are pretty simple, and I'm going to use the same materials. I'll use wool. I ended up using wool and silk thread because it has just way more sheen. It's so beautiful, and the thread that I use comes from Boise, Idaho, and it's hand dyed by the woman who has the small company. So it's really beautiful, and the linen cloth. One of the panels, the cloth comes from a store in New York, and the rest of it came from a store in Toronto. So I did like finding the right weight, because the Bayeux Tapestry is on that fine cloth. A lot of people now embroider on very heavy, dense, and very hard to move, but this is very soft and fluid. So I came to the idea that I would do a story of oil. Number one, I live in a city that is the oil capital of Canada, and it is, I didn't know anything about it. And I thought, well, that's a good place to start. And I thought, well, I wanted to know, Ty, who we'll be talking with, he said, well, it seems like an origin story, and he's so right. It's about where all these firsts, like what was the first, where did it come from, how did it come out of the earth, who were the people who first using it in some way. And so there's that earth history, and it's a social history, the last 5,000 years in which people have found ways to employ it. And it's an energy story. It's not just about oil. There's the transition to coal. There's gas in that story, and then there's the renewables. and it's an environmental story. All the dinosaurs that are in the upper and lower marginalia, they're still birds, and they are a type of dinosaur, but much of life on Earth disappeared because of a kind of climate change when the asteroid and or the volcano or the two combined created this event that covered the Earth in material that stopped the sun getting through. So I just thought they were such a good, in the Bayou Tapestry, the upper and lower margins are where the conjecture is. So I'm using that for my commentary is, we are the dinosaurs, maybe. And then there was this beautiful invention, like when all the things that we've been able to do with energy and resources, and the history of color changes over time because of the materials that are available. And in the 19th century, William Perkins invents aniline dyes, first using the coal tar waste, and eventually it's now made from petroleum products. And there's mythology in there because our beliefs have changed, human beliefs have changed over time, and they also, almost every mythological creature represents some part of our story, like the god of snow and the god of wind. And then there's also the costume history. I am a costume history nut. I love everything to do with how we dress, what we dress with, the materials we use, how they're made. It's an endless fascination. When I'm working, I start off with a sketchbook. I do all my sketches first in the book, then I trace those sketches on little pieces of paper, and then I make my master cartoon by first placing all those little pieces of paper so I can find where they most look good. So it's like, oh, it looks good here. No, I think, oh, no, you can't move it over. So you're always moving things around, and then once I solidify it, I kind of tape them down, and then I transfer them into the master cartoon. And so there's 220 feet of drawing that I did with, when I was doing the research, it took me a year of drawing and research to complete the 8 panels. And then I transfer the cartoon onto tracing paper, and then it gets transferred again onto the fabric. So it's very laborious, lots of hand, and the drawing kind of changes each time you transfer it. And then I go back to some of my original drawings and try to finesse them a bit more, and then I start embroidering. And the stitches that are called all together, they make the Bayou stitch, is an outline stitch, which is the lines in gold, and then a fill stitch, which is the blue that's underneath the green, and so that fills it in, and then you have layers of laid stitches which hold down anchor those stitches, and the couching anchors the laid stitches. So it just is a series of layers, and what I love about how they all come together is they create all these diverse patternings, and I started to really play with it the more times I had to, as I went. If you looked at how I was sewing in that third panel, which is where I started, and then go back to the beginning and go all the way to the end, there's lots of things I started to play with in the textures as much as I could, still using those 4 basic stitches. And that's the back story. That's what it looks like. Yeah, very different. Yeah. And then I have a group of friends that I've known for years. We've been getting together every 6 weeks or so, every 2 months, where we share what we've been making. And they are a lovely group of people who are artists and historians and people who've gone to fashion colleges like FIT in New York. So they know a lot, and they look a lot, and they love a lot. And I showed them the work. I had told them about what I was doing, but I washed my floor, and I rolled it out down my hallway, and you can see some of their feet. And it was the first time I had shown a full finished piece, full panel. And I could tell from their response that I had, I think, magic in a bottle. It was just like, oh, they were quiet, and then they were like, oh, and then they started talking like as if I wasn't there, and they were the experts, and they had all these stories to tell about the work, and I knew that was the part that made me happiest, was that they just embraced it, and it became something. It was their story too. The first show at the Glenbow, there were over 1,000 people at the show, and there was a adjacent show opening. It was Lauren Harris, and he is one of our famous group of 7, highly looked at, and it was, my room was the one that was really busy, so and it was lovely because they didn't know who I was, and I could be right there, fly on the wall, and just watch people responding to it, and that made me so happy. And that's continued to make me happy, just seeing people, because people of all ages, different, like where I live, there's a lot of oil people and there's a lot of environmentalists, and they both liked it, because I tried to tell a story that was balanced, showing just the events, finding whatever I could say, like that could be fact. This happened. We have all this visual material and historical information that tells us this is what happened. And after that, after I had recovered for I was working an 80-hour week while I was finishing it. In the 3 years leading up to that show, I was just really intensely working because I had to finish it. And then after I recovered, I said, oh, I'm so sad not to be stitching. And I haven't told all my stories. And the stories I want to tell now are sort of the repercussions of what happens when we have all the energy in the world at our fingertips and all the resources. So the Age of Uncertainty, and you've heard a little bit about the description, I was trying to voice some of the uncertainty that people are feeling. I shouldn't say voice. I was trying to illustrate some of the uncertainty, and there's 12 panels, and I imagined them being sort of in a circle. So there's no, first, second, third. It's more like it's a conversation of all these things are happening, and they are what we are talking about, and they are causes of concern, and they're also we're complicit in it. We're involved in it. We may work in it, and there's all these things that are happening. And I wanted to have humor, and I wanted to have it to be beautiful, so that people could look at dark matters, but feel compelled to witness it. And I used a book of hours as a kind of book of prayer that were illuminated manuscripts that were made or used in the 12th, 13th, 14th century before the printing press. And some of them were incredibly beautifully illustrated, and I'm not very good in French, but très riche heures de Duc de Berry, these beautiful rich hours of the Duc de Berry, and there's these panels of egg tempera paintings that are very miniature and beautiful and exquisite. And that's what I was trying to do with the thread. And I wanted to there's these panels called the labor of months. So my labor was this labor of what's keeping us up at night. And some of the close-ups, some things were like to do with nuclear power and surveillance and AI, and then after that, because it was such a dark dive, like all the research that went into it was really difficult. So I thought, really, when it comes down to it, what I am as an environmentalist is I just want this beautiful earth to be a place where we can not only survive but thrive. And part of that is all the life forms that are in our near us, but we may not even notice them. So in my marginalia, in this one, there's lots of insects, and some of these insects would probably be a couple of millimeters in size, but I've blown them up so that they're very visible, and they're there. And then there's the and there's all the wildlife and flora and fauna that are in this piece are the flora and fauna in the provinces where I call my home, which is Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. And some of those animals, they don't have borders. They just go back and forth between Canada and the US and Mexico, wherever they want. Yeah. And so this is some of the close-ups of it, and that was part of my artist statement, that we're related at an atomic level. The stones, the flora and fauna, everything, and we all come from the stars. And so I use quotes from E.B. White and my hometown gal, Joni Mitchell, which is, we are stardust and we're golden and we are billion years carbon. And that, to me, was, it's such a lovely way. And Carl Sagan said it afterwards. He said we are star stuff, but she said it first, just saying. And so this is me in my little workspace when I'm embroidering. I use a frame that is it's supposed to be for doing hand quilting, and I do, I found it as it's a perfect hand embroidery frame. And just December, the Globe and Mail wrote about my show, The Age of Uncertainty, and said it was one of the top 10 shows to see in Canada in 2025. I couldn't have been happier, and it was already down when it came out. But I just thought, you know, that's the way it is. But I was very happy for her to talk about craft, and it elevates craft, and it also was such a, who doesn't like to be talked about in the national news? Good. Anyhow, that's my story, and we're going to have a conversation and hopefully talk to you and answer questions. Thank you.
You don't have to do anything there. We can just over there. Thank you so much, Sandra, and all of you for coming. And before I introduce my guests, I just want to, as always, thank the entire team here at the Stanley and at the university. We continue to come up with new challenges for our installation crew, and they always rise to the occasion. So we are in their debt. I'm Diana Tuite. I'm the Senior Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art here at the Stanley, and it is my pleasure to be joined this evening by Ty Priest and Hope Tucker. Hope Tucker is Associate Professor of Cinematic Arts. She has taught video, film, photography, animation, new media, and visual studies in the US and the UK. In her work, she reframes the passing of sites, people, communities, freedoms, cultural markers, rituals, and ways of being. Since 2000, she has directed the Obituary Project, a compendium of time and lens-based works. Tyler Priest, Associate Professor of History, studies the history of oil and energy. His research and teaching interests include environmental history, the history of business and technology, the history of capitalism and globalization, and public history. His new book, Offshore Oildom, draws on a wealth of untapped sources to tell the riveting story of the United States' quest to secure the oil riches of the sea. So thank you both. And I have two questions, I guess, to get started that are general. And I know there are many artists and makers in the room. First, I'll say, you can't ever predict what will be going on in the world when this work is shown. But whatever is going on will resonate. And I just want to note a very small item that was in the art press last week that may have escaped notice, but a museum called the Black Gold Museum opened in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Did they? I was going to say, if they haven't spoken to you, they will. But I think to start, I would just say, because I know there are students here too, I'm thinking about studio space, and I'm thinking about it as more than a space, but a mindset. And there's an artist, Diana Al-Hadid, who describes the studio as an extension of the mind, a way of having a mind outside your brain. So taking this idea of the studio as interior and maybe exterior to self and a place for a kind of experimentation. I'm just wondering, before we really dive into the Black Gold Tapestry, if you could say a little bit more about how you work and that space that you're in, and maybe where the experimentation is in some of the work that you've made to date.
Well, I do all my drawing on my kitchen table, and I do all my sewing in my office space, and the fabric gets wound around the frame. And when I'm making it, now experimentation. I don't. That's a good question. I don't like. Probably the experimentation. I write the story first, so I find what I'm going to write about. With the Black Gold Tapestry, I had to sort of more. This is the part of the story I'm telling. Can I find artifacts that will support the illustration, and then will I? Then I would come up with a headline. Like, so there are little, in the Bayeux Tapestry there are Latin headlines about what's happening in the picture, so it sort of tells you what's going on, and that I did that in the tapestry too, again, just to mirror some of the elements in it. But I don't know about experimentation. I think I've experimented all my life, like, am I going to be a filmmaker? Let's make a film with some dancers. How about if we repel people off I got my company to allow, that I was working for, to allow me to repel people down the center of their atrium, and then dancing in glass. Like, I did a lot of experimentation in film, like just seeing where could I put dancers, and how can I tell a story about business and this go mentality that I'm surrounded by in the city I live in, and create kind of visual humor that also is beautiful to look at, and so that when I came to this, I think the experimentation was how to have these beautiful lively dinosaurs and creating these colors. Like when I choose the palette of colors, but I don't say this is where the red is going to go. I mostly riff with it. So it's like, oh, now I've done some red, now let's put some blue here. And it feels more like when music is being improvised. That's what I felt like. And I only picked out one little leg of a dinosaur because it was, if you'll notice, all the dinosaurs have one color back leg, and it's different from the foreground. And I mistakenly, at the very beginning, did two legs that were the same color. And that's the only place, and I picked out one face because it wasn't quite as character driven. But I never picked out, I can't believe that I didn't. I have picked out since.
Okay. Just so I have one more, and then I'm going to turn things over and open it up. And I think things have changed considerably in terms of the respect and visibility that craft now holds, and since you started this piece. And so I'm thinking of being at the art fair last week and all of us talking about how everyone is weaving with paper, weaving with clay, weaving with fiber. So I wonder how you see yourself now in this new ecosystem, and whether it was anything you might have expected when you embarked upon this project.
In 2004, my favorite fabric store closed, and many of my friends felt bereft. And it was, as I watched them tear down the building, I thought, nobody's making anything. That's 2004, and it really hurt me. And I thought, craft is dying. Who's going to pick up the thread? And I just felt so sad. So when I made the tapestry, one of the key things was, I'm going to make something so big that it will, first off, in the art world, tapestry was way down in the hierarchy of arts. And that wasn't true back in when the Bayeux Tapestry was made. Then it was king. So I mean, it's the cycle. But I just thought, I'm going to make something so big and beautiful. And I feel like probably what happened during COVID really helped it. And I think too is that there's enough artists like Grayson Perry is brought ceramics to the fore 30 years ago. So I think I don't know if I was like ahead of the curve, but and it takes so long to do the work I did, so I just had to believe that what I was doing was worthwhile.
Great. Well, I want to turn things over to either of you if you have a question to start off. I have some that I know will involve all of us, but we've had a few opportunities to converse in the galleries and had a nice exchange of some ideas. So.
Thank you. It's a real privilege to be a part of this whole event. I'm a historian of oil, and I have to confess that this is probably the largest audience that I've ever seen for the history of oil. So I might have to rethink my approach to the subject. I mean that seriously. Just witnessing this magnificent piece of art has given me ideas about how to rethink the way I present the topic. I would have never expected to see the subject that I study presented in this way, and it's so delightful. It's really, and I teach about the age of oil. We start the age of oil in the mid-19th century. Sandra's age of oil goes all the way back to when the hydrocarbons were created in the Devonian period. And it just, I love the way she presents how humans have encountered oil before the age of oil. There's just something essential and material and organic. I mean, oil is an organic, substance. We tend to not think of it that way, but there's so many things we could talk about. I guess it's hard to believe that you knew nothing about the subject before you started the tapestry. I'm just kind of curious where you went to learn about it.
Where I went to learn about it is where everybody does, the library. I love the library. Yes. But like when I started the work, that it was 2000. So 2008, I had to apply for funding, so I had to already start thinking about it, and I did a lot of research around that. And there was some, I go to books, and I went through to there was a lot of books, and then lots of articles, magazine articles, then lots of internet articles, whatever I could get my hands on to kind of create this timeline. And I come from a family of like total learners. Like my sisters I have 3 sisters. And my mother and father, we were always talking about stuff and always talking about what's going on, and my parents made sure that we were always reading and looking at things and discussing it and arguing about it, and it was great. And so I feel like I can, and my husband is amazing too, and he always said, well, you can teach yourself anything, and it's kind of true. We have so many resources, even more now with the accessibility, like everything's online, all these amazing things. So I figure, you know, if you have the energy, then you can teach yourself and then ask all the questions. And I've because of filmmaking, I learned how to be not shy to ask questions and contact people and make those things happen. One of my favorite stories, I love Steve Jobs and his history. And when he was 10 years old, he phones up the what was it, Hewlett Packard, and asks if they will give him some piece of equipment. He's 10 years old, and that's part of it. It's like, just ask, just go out and do that. And as you know, as learners, lifelong learners, I just love. And all my films that I've made, I had to learn about fly fishing. I didn't know anything about it. I just liked the idea of it. And I didn't know anything about the West Coast Nisqually people, but I learned a lot about it. And it was just all that research, not to be afraid of going into subjects. And sometimes when you don't know anything, then you actually have good questions, because nothing's a stupid question. It's just like, you know, just ask it. Does that?
I just want to make one more comment, and then I'll turn it over to you. Your work really sort of fits into the tradition we have at this university of interdisciplinary conversations, especially interdisciplinary conversations involving art. And when I first came to the University of Iowa, Teresa Mangum, who's here, our emerita director of the Obermann Center, was all about putting scientists and artists in conversation, and she roped me into doing an Obermann symposium on the cultures of energy. But it's always stayed with me, and this really, I think that's why we have such a big crowd here, because this is the kind of conversation that this university really is good at promoting. So I just wanted to, give a shout out to Teresa and her efforts and continuing this tradition here.
Use my miniature microphone. Does it work? Yes. I am at a point as a filmmaker where I'm very interested in making lo-fi work, because filmmaking is so resource extractive. It takes so much energy, and it's all hidden, right? It's not the kind of industry, and it is an industry, very much an industry. It's all about keeping that behind the screen, and it's all about sales. So there are so many ways in which I appreciate this work, but it's a kind of refusal of a model that's much larger. It's also, you said, I want this to be very accessible. It's so invitational and making all the frames visible at the same time. So there's no phone that you're holding in front of your lap with a large head, right? A person isolated from everyone else. We're seeing everyone at the same time, and you have a lot of opportunity as to how you read the narrative. So you could go one way, but you could also go backwards, or you could go straight. So, my favorite part, the nuclear moment, and then go around again. I'm just curious to hear you talk about, what does it mean to make accessible work? How do you want people to engage, and what are the parts of filmmaking that, in the parts of larger industries that, because I think this is a refusal in some sense of ways we may think we need to live. What do you hope people will question as they are trained to look more closely through the work, which is, I think this is what is present. The other thing is that you are director, you are producer, you are artist. All of the roles of filmmaking, when you are doing it all yourself, are just tremendous. And so when I was a student, I was taught by a sculptor who was dismissive of the idea of jobbing the work out. You traditionally would have other people do some part of your process, even if it's the installation part, the people who never get credited because they're installing the work, which is, for many forms of art, just an incredible, part of the process. The research and keeping this research together, many people would hire someone else to do that. But when you do that, you are missing as an artist the opportunity to learn things that you really might benefit from knowing. So I just want to highlight all that. I'm sure you all know it. But it's just incredible how much care you've taken with every step of this.
Thank you. It was the fun part. Like, I love the research. But when I was making films, one of the things that I don't know if, nope, here we go. One of the things I knew was that I would never have the kind of resources to make a really big film. And I grew up loving films like Lawrence of Arabia, that if you haven't seen it, it is such an amazing story, and it does in some ways tell a story about, protecting oil resources. That's why they were there down in where he was. And I saw that movie when I was 10, and I went, I want to wear that robe. And anyhow, but I learned to appreciate the other parts of the story as I got older. But I was always doing my budgets for making films. I did all the budgeting. I knew where every penny was being spent, and my one feature was a very, very, very low budget feature, and it was $1 million. And that's nothing. That's nothing. And I thought I could do something for $26,000 that would be kind of, I've had bigger audiences with my tapestry. And I had lots of audiences for some of my short films, but this was like, it has traveled, it has had this opportunity to meet lots of people and talk with lots of people, and it's always very personal. It feels so good to just know that they're like, I'm of the people. I try to talk about what is important to us as a species, as a neighbor, as a friend, as a wife, a mother, all the things that I try to speak to. So you're right, it is extractive. And I wasn't really thinking about that so much as I didn't want to have to work with so many people because there's so many roles to play. And in Canada, there's a few producers who can do the big projects, but mostly you're doing it all on your own. So it's an make it what is it? Make it yourself. It's like a DIY, do it yourself. And that's. I thought if I'm going to do it myself, I can just do all this by myself, and I can do it at my own pace. And if it falls, it falls. But when you're working in film, when you see those horror stories about what goes wrong on a set, it's because there's so much at stake, all that money at stake every hour, every minute, and people fall apart. And this way I didn't have to deal with any of that. My sets were always good. I had short days, 10-hour days, and that was a short day. And I treated people well, but it was a lot, and this seemed like worthwhile to do. I feel like maybe I was just doing my like little short stories, and now I found all the things that I could put into this are there. I don't know if that answers your question, but
it was a large comment, but you created the third space that you lost when the store closed. That's how I feel, because films, it's true, often have very small audiences, and we usually don't get to talk to the people who come. So there's no engagement. You have an investment in something, and then you don't get to talk to people who really are interested. But to have people come, you all are here. I feel like you've created some of what was lost in that store.
And it's a dialogue. What I do love about this work is when you're seeing a film, you have to be quiet. You can munch on your popcorn, but you're not supposed to talk. In television, you're sitting beside each other, you're commenting as it's going on, but you're still kind of have to, you're still listening to what it's talking to you. But this piece feels like I watch people walking the tapestry, and they're talking about what they know about it. It's just like a talking stick. It provides a little point of conversation, and it might be about the sewing, it might be about the story, but it becomes about this. It's best when you're seeing it with somebody else, I think, like where you can have, point out things. And I like that so much because it puts it right back into, you know, it's not about, it's a two-way conversation.
I think I just want to add to that, because I think as a museum professional, there is a significant amount of text that you wrote to accompany the work, but the decision to make that available not alongside the work in the gallery, but through other technologies, is one that I think has made me really give serious thought to the amount of information and the way we present information to audiences that we think is integral to the appreciation of a work of art on our walls. So I think we'll have conversations about museum interpretation that are different for having shown this piece. And you know, another point that I think brings in maybe both of you as academics, when we spoke, energy transition is one of many subjects in the tapestry, but one that really comes to the fore also is knowledge acquisition and the formalization of so many scholarly disciplines that we encounter in the tapestry. We see them rise, and then they make legible the events that you've shown us prior in the work. And so I wonder, both of you also as academics, as people who are dealing with histories of oil and of mediatic technologies, if that's a very difficult thing to do, I think, to make something historiographic that is also so true to itself. And so I just wondered if that was anything you struggled with at any point.
Yes, and I don't like, so it's so long since I made it. It's almost 10 years ago now. But I did, I wanted it to be, like, there's lots of little Easter eggs of my personal life, things that represent my, you know, symbolism within it. I'm a big fan of symbolism. It's such a lovely way, like another kind of language. And so, yes, I did kind of struggle with how to, what's the word for it? I guess I thought, like, I'm pretty good at drawing, and so I thought I was pretty good at making even the dinosaurs have a character, a personality. And that's sort of where I had some agency. Like, I try to take these historical facts and then try to animate it, which you do in film, right? You're bringing, you know, even if the story isn't true, as in it's fiction, but you're still wanting it to have a truth to it, which is the, like, you know, the facts, you know, maybe not completely factual, but the spirit is there, it's true. And that's what I think I try to do, is that you could sort of imagine when you see that poor little boy with his scissors and he's being, you know, yelled at in the factories where they had, you know, child labor starting at the age of 5, and they would be working these like obscene hours of 12 to 16 hours, and he has no compassion for her and him, and I sort of thought, like, that is a truth, that there are people who have no compassion, and there are people who are the victims of that, and that's I try to, you know, that's the story, that's the filmic side of me coming out. So that's, yeah, like trying to illustrate so that it feels, even though they're kind of cartoonish, they have, I hope that they have an integrity, yeah.
What was the question?
Well, you can ask. You can.
Okay.
I mean, I think that my question. Well, we're sharing a mic, so where I would ask you if there were anything that, as far as you're concerned, Sandra left out of the tapestry.
Well, it's unfair to you know, second guess the kind of history she was trying to tell. It's a story of origins, you know, the origins of hydrocarbon, the origins of the first use of bitumen, the origins of the first drilling, the first pipeline, you know, and you know, in the discipline of history, that's kind of old-fashioned. You don't, you know, it's not about process and evolution out of these origins, but embroidery, I'm okay with that. Embroidery is an old-fashioned craft, right? And it kind of fits with what you're doing, and you know, we need to set we need origins and moments of invention and innovation to set the markers for how we understand history. What was kind of the most jarring thing for me is, you know, the tapestry is this history of origins and innovation and adaptations, and then to the last panel, which is where I study history, in that very last panel. But I do the Deepwater Horizon was, you know, scene is really amazing and kind of unsettling, and it brings me back because I served on the National Oil Spill Commission that investigated the Deepwater Horizon. I mean, I wasn't doing any kind of forensic investigations, but they hired me to sort of provide the historical context. And it was such a big event in 2010, but people tend to forget about it. I mean, I've almost completely forgotten about, even though it was the most important news story in 2010, and it made me, you know, it was clear that, you know, this was right when you were designing the whole thing, and it's such a poignant. And then you have the dead, the 11 dead, you know, replacing the dead dinosaurs in the bottom section. But I think we need to sort of remember that and remember the kinds of technological risks that we, you know, engage in the modern world. I remember after the Deepwater Horizon, there was an environmental history textbook published, and the very last chapter was about the Deepwater Horizon, and I thought it was pretty good. And then the next edition of the textbook, there was no mention of the Deepwater Horizon, and it was climate change. I mean, I you know, I understand. I mean, I understand that, but it's how quickly we forget. And you know, all history is a product of the time that it's produced or written, and I could see. For me, it was interesting. You know, you started in 2007, 2008. Oil prices hit $140 a barrel. They're almost back up there again. We're thinking about scarcity. You have King Hubbard and the peak oil, the profit of peak oil in there, who I've also written about. So I think you did a really good job. You know, I'm not going to say what I think should have been in there, but that last panel is a real rupture from what precedes it. You know, it's about the end rather than origins, and you're even kind of suggesting the end of the human species, right? I saw the tapestry right after I saw Elizabeth Colbert talk on Saturday. Maybe some of the audience was there. And she was talking about the sixth extinction, and she said she wouldn't bet against the human species as the one species that would survive the extinction, along with cockroaches. But you know, those two things were playing out in my mind, and I don't know. I don't really have a question, but maybe. And the work that has followed, I guess, kind of maybe answers my question, which would be, you know, would you have done that last panel differently, you know, 10 years later or 10 years sooner?
So when I was getting close to the finishing of the drawing, that's when Deepwater Horizon happened, 2010. And I finished the drawing in 2010, and then I was embroidering it in 2017. And so that was 7 years. And what I noticed was, and I was, I'd started to pay a lot of attention to all sorts of things because of this, the history of oil, and and energy and investments changed. The investment in because of that event, I think a lot more investment went into renewables. And there's a fellow who's quite well known in where I come from, Peter Terzaki, and he said this new iteration of what's going on is probably going to also escalate renewables. And so that's what I added in. I didn't have the windmills in my original drawing. I added those in as a representative of all the different kinds of renewables. And it's not to say that renewables are in any way going to be not extractive, but they will possibly keep some of the ozone layer intact if we can do it fast enough and with the spirit. But as we're saying this AI requires huge amounts of energy, and that is a huge problem. And I still think, like, have we really asked for this? I don't know. And is it being put upon us? Yes, it is. And do we have to listen? No, we don't. And anyhow, I won't go there. But it was just like one of those things. Yes, I was, and the news cycle kind of controls us. We are, as soon as the next really big story comes along, suddenly that's not so important. So I've kept on going back. I've gone back every year to find out, what happened. They're still dealing with the aftermath of the Deepwater Horizon, as you know. So it's a ongoing story, but it's not a headliner anymore. Yeah.
If the question is about what I notice in terms of form as a maker, I would say, again, you have to look at the scale of the audience. And people now pay very little attention, I think, to films and how they're created. It's almost normalized. Like, this is something that happens on my phone. It happens on a screen. I can pay half attention. I can look here at my other device while this film is playing. I can keep my phone on and talk to you at the same time. So the artistry around what it means to make work in time, I both believe in deeply because I do it. And it's also often, as time shifts, important to think about how can we make changes. So how can we decide not to use AI? How can we decide to drive less? How can we decide how to fix the water in this state so we don't all get cancer? Maybe we need to make embroidered films and other forms that can do other things that don't require the close-up, that include like the beautiful marginalia, right? So we can speak to multiple sentiments at the same time, which I also think film can do, but this is, to many of us, like a new way of considering this moment in time and the historical moment. And you told a story about how a crowd of 8-year-olds like think you're a star and just gave her a standing O, and it seems like a very democratic way to consider that we move forward.
Yes, thank you. And one of the other things is I'm one person, and I sort of like, it was like, what can I do with what I know, what I have? I'm just one person, but I have these skills, and to be able to use, all the things that I've learned through all the things that I've done. And I was nowhere, it wasn't, I just learned how to do things, and some of them were successful and some of them weren't, but they were a lot of fun to do and a lot of hard work to do, and sometimes it was very painful and really sad when your film that you spent 4 years making dies on the operating table, pretty much. And that was, it took me a year to recover from that, and I came out like a phoenix. I just like I recreated myself, and that's kind of what we have to do. And I loved what you said about the technology and sciences coming together with the arts. I'm very big on this STEAM, not STEM. When I grew up, I'm 70, almost 70. There was a lot of very balanced education. There was lots of the arts. I went to a public school. Everybody in the neighborhood's going there. We had to do choir. We had to do spoken word. We had to do gymnastics. Everybody had to do everything. And so it wasn't all science and math and focusing on those end games. And I think that the humanities and arts are the humanist part of our that's where we show our dreams and our loves and our aspirations, and nature's the other place where that gives so much to us. And so those are our two happy places, and I think that they need to be in every part of our that's what's missing right now, I think, in that world, that we it should be more balanced, and we'll be a happier species, in my opinion.
Well, that's a nice lead-in to, I think, my last question. As you process with the tapestry, by the last few panels, the natural world really has begun to sort of disappear, except for very strategic markers. And I wonder if that de-emphasis is consciously a function of the tightening of that anthropogenic aperture. And then related, you talk about wanting the tapestry to be a kind of balanced narrative. I think I was struck by how much, when you identify yourself, you stress that you're an environmentalist, but there really is no presence of environmental activism or resistance movements in the piece. And I wonder, I would ask if that is balanced, or if that they are part of a historical record, if that could be interpreted as a kind of imbalance, if that was something you struggled with again at all, or feel like, it is the logic of the whole.
I think so. Environmentalism, like when you start looking at every aspect of it, there's, we get a lot of it wrong there too, and there's a lot of I'm not listening to you. So I tried to look at what I could say with quite a bit of confidence that would be, this is it. And so it both sides embraced it. So it suggests to me that we just are sometimes, when people are talking, and you just don't like the messenger, and you're just not going to listen. And even they're telling you exactly, what somebody else will tell you, and you'll say, yeah, that's really true. It's like, I don't know. I think I just wanted to, my environmental statement is embedded in my dinosaurs. It is saying we are slowly killing ourselves in a different version of climate change. And the word climate change is just saying that something is happening in this, in the atmosphere. So that was my message, and I thought it would be a subtle way, in the same way that in the Bayou Tapestry, what's in the margins is commenting on what's going on. And the people who made the tapestry, from what most historians are saying, is that it was made by the losers. And they were making this work and making comment about William and his people. And like there's stuff in the, and I don't understand all the symbolism, but I thought that was really, smart. So I do have my marginalia that makes comments upon, like, there's one scene where we're by the Dead Sea, and there are swimmers in the border. They're in the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea has, for years and years, it was a place where people could get rid of their psoriasis because there's bitumen in the water, and that helps with psoriasis, and people would go there to get healthier. And the Dead Sea is drying up. They had the hotels used to be right by the edge of the water, and now they have to drive people from the hotels to the Dead Sea, and that's part of what's happening to the environment. Is this is part of climate change.
Well, I would say either of you before we open.
Why don't we open? Why don't we open it? Yeah, to the audience.
Okay, so I know there are always many questions for Sandra. So I believe there is a mic that one of our colleagues, Agnes, is it you, will be able to deliver to anyone with a question. So if you have one, please raise your hand, and the mic and Agnes will find you.
Thank you for being here. Your work is not preachy, and I really liked that.
Thank you.
I thought that children could easily appreciate it. I appreciated it. Um, did I see Mark Twain?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So tell me about that. That it was very anachronistic in terms of where he appears. And can you reveal to me why he's there?
Okay, so there's a story that Mark Twain. It's in Innocents Abroad. He tells a story that he's in Egypt, and he sees them burning some of the mummies in the trains because they don't have coal, they don't have wood, and they're burning them. It's not necessarily a true story. That's why it's in the little borders, because it's conjecture.
Yes.
And but it was a funny story, and I thought, but that is like they were wrapping the mummies in bitumen soaked linens. That was part. I don't know
sort
if
of
they
free
were soaked.
association there. Yeah, I like that. I
Yes.
like that.
I may be just reading too much into this from my own perspective, but as I walked through, as I came to the end, one of the thoughts I had is, had you been getting any feedback or trying to make any statement about the idea that, yes, this is an art and a craft so beautifully applied, but it's been usually associated with women's crafts. And yet the history of oil has just got so much domination through male structures and wars and industrialization, etc. And to me, that was a theme that I carried away. Isn't this an interesting twist on interpreting that kind of a history through what had been primarily a female's form of art, at least in our country?
I often say it's a man's story told with a woman's art. Yeah, I agree. And I thought it was, how do you get women to look at a story of oil? You just make it in embroidery. Yeah.
It is changing. The study of the history of oil is moving in a lot of interesting directions. So it's not all about the captains of industry and the wars that use oil, but there's a lot of historians now working on the social dimensions of oil, and there's a lot of ways in which it's quite gendered. Shell, in my class I teach on the history of oil, I show them some advertisements, and that's where you really get a sense of, that the oil companies do see women as customers, as consumers, and they play to them, for sure. Shell ran a series of ads, Shell A to Z, for all its chemicals, and there was one that was M. The ad was all the things beginning with M that Shell produced, and M was for mother, and mother does all these things, and how oil makes mothers' lives, oil and chemical products and synthetic products makes mothers' lives so much easier. And they even called it, chemicals from Shell are mother's little helper. And this was from the 1950s, and people know the reference to that. So that's I really appreciate your question. We're kind of behind, the historians of oil are kind of behind the curve a little bit. We're catching up fast.
Back here at the back. I just have to first say that I was in awe when I first saw your tapestry displayed at the Stanley, and that the Stanley did an amazing job of displaying it with the color background that they chose and the way you come into it, and it just hits you, and it's so stunning. And I've brought a number of people to see, and as you said, it's the conversation that you have with other people when you're seeing it that makes it really a wonderful piece. And so my question to you is, in studying this for 10 years, and coming from Calgary and near the tar sands and all the controversy that went with that, did your view of the oil industry change after your research?
I have a much more nuanced. I didn't know anything. I mean, I knew how to say it, never attracted me as a business to be involved in, because it didn't have art in it and it didn't have beauty, and like I couldn't see the beauty. But now I'm quite obsessed still with the subject. I have an Instagram account, and I keep on going back to parts of the tapestry and finding new stories to tell, because there's always new stories and new research, and some of the things that happened when I was doing the research, like the Neanderthal people who used bitumen for the first time in a way, like using it as a glue. That was the first artifact that they have found so far. But when I was doing that research, when I started the research, they were saying, well, Neanderthals, we have, a certain percentage, some people have a certain percentage of Neanderthal DNA, and now they say we all do. And it's sort of like, okay, so they disappeared, and now we took over, but they didn't disappear. They're still here. And I just love that, like, science finds out new things. There's all these new things that are being discovered. So I really, trying to update as things change and evolve, and that it still, the images still help to tell different kinds of stories, and I like that a lot. Yeah, so.
I was going to ask, how did you feel at that last stitch? But it sounds to me like you've kind of answered that you haven't really completed that last stitch, maybe.
That's true. For that project, there was a camera crew. My friend, because I was in that industry, and it's news. Nobody makes these things, so let's bring in a camera crew to finish. You can be filmed as you finish that last stitch. So I had to actually wait 5 days to do the last stitch. So I had an audience, and that was just fine. And I looked awful. And I was like, oh, there's my terrible posture. My daughter got on me after that. That was the one thing I did have to work on afterwards. It's like maybe I was a little bit hunched over and tired. So yeah, that was. But I haven't finished the last stitch. That might happen with my last breath. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question related to kind of a comparison to filmmaking today. I hear commentary from people in like the Hollywood film industry, actors and producers and directors, that they feel like modern films are boring, that they aren't complex anymore because they're being dumbed down intentionally because of the loss of attention span, that the same plot lines have to get repeated over and over again because people are not missing them, they're looking at their phone. But the tapestry has so much complexity to it that I feel like it's more than a film. Like, I spent an hour walking through it, and I could probably do that multiple times. And I feel like, I'm just wondering if you have a feeling today that you've created something that's actually more intrinsically fulfilling for people than modern films that are coming out now are making them feel.
Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts about modern film, but the whole thing with film is that fewer and fewer people are making the decisions about what gets made, and they call it dumbing down. I think it's like there's an adrenaline rush from watching a lot of the really big budget work, and that's what people are trying to do over and over again. But what I have noticed is that even that becomes boring. Even that becomes, I've seen that so many times, you're not telling me anything new. And this is such an old art form, and although lots of people go to see the Bayeux Tapestry, it's not talked about. You have to sort of know about it, and you'll find out about it probably because you're a textile artist, or you're doing, research around medieval art or medieval warfare or something like that. But I think the complexity of this work, it, it, I, I think people used to have more time, and there was a lot more of a like when you see the Lawrence of Arabia. It's a very complex film. There's lots going on, and you can study it, and you can look at it, and it's beautiful, and it's sad, and it's there's all the parts that you want, and it's surprising because he dies, at such a young age, and it starts with his death and it ends with his death, and it's just such a there's so many wonderful elements, and that's kind of what I was trying to do with the tapestry, was that to renew our interest in storytelling and different ways to tell stories. So I didn't know, when I started, it wasn't, I keep on finding, it was probably there that I was trying to tell it. It is a complex story, how to tell it simply enough that it will appeal to somebody who's 8 years old, or that they can get something out of it, like I got out of watching Lawrence of Arabia at the age of 10. And at the same time, that when you're older, that you can, know enough, you've read enough, you've seen enough, that you're going to, pick up on some of the subtler, some of the stories that you know about. So, yeah, film, it's left me behind. I don't go to films very often, and a lot of times I'm watching on, I'm watching the Criterion collection and looking at films that had a lot more joy. The other thing is, all the films are full of really, I've got enough problems in my life. I don't need any more. Yeah, and it's not that I don't want to walk with you and, a mile in your shoes, but I would love to, also be amused in some way.
I think the work has found an audience because it invites you in, right? So the color invites you in, is asking you to make some connections for yourself. It's giving you the opportunity to learn something. It has some confidence and faith. And I think you described it as, I want to encourage people that they too could do this if they wanted to. Like, you have the opportunity and the ability to do anything. You could make a radical shift in your own life. You can participate in a radical shift in a political moment, right? It is possible for us to do things, even if we're not sure if we still can, which at this moment it sometimes is unclear that we can. But I think that it's deeply affirmative in the way that much cinema is made under a different kind of model and by fewer people now, right? So the studio system has shifted radically. Most cinema doesn't follow the model of one artist directing and following their vision. It requires a tremendous amount of resources, although there are many people who are making, right, other kinds of cinema, which are asking you to figure out the question for yourself, are encouraging you to put the pieces together, or supporting inquiry, right, and critical thought. Some cinema is just there for, to quiet your mind.
So I have a question about, when you first started out, you gave the story of how you started out going to a museum, and then you decided you're going to make this epic thing. Did you go through the phase of making samplers and other kinds of things and saying, oh, I can do a little panel, oh, this is how a dinosaur would look like, this is how colors blend with this, in the process, or did you just go from idea to commit to buying a whole bunch?
0 to 60. I did, because I had to apply for funding. I wanted to get funding to do the research. So I told them what I wanted to do, and I did a sampler about, what is it, it was almost like the same depth, and by, I don't know, about this big. And it was in the colors that were being used in the Bayeux Tapestry that I did that. And when I showed the drawing to a guy who is a gallerist, and I spread out the drawing and, talking to him, and he said, well, why would you have just the colors that they used at the time that they made the Bayeux Tapestry when we have all these other colors? And I went, thank you, yes. And it's like, because so that was a decision that changed, and thank God, because I love color. And if it was in the same colors, much as I liked the Bayeux Tapestry, we have come a long way in color. And they used 8, I think it's 8, or sometimes you read 9, sometimes 8, but it is a very limited palette. And they did a lot of things with it, but I used 72 colors, so yeah.
I just wondered, when you saw the Bayou Tapestry, did you know right away you wanted to do something like that?
I had not seen the Bayou Tapestry until 2024, long after I'd finished it. I had books, I knew about it because I'd gone to art college, and history of art, that's always one little element of it. And I don't remember my class, like what did they say about it, and it didn't twig at that time that when I was 21 that I wanted to do that. And you know, it takes a lifetime to find out what you're capable of doing, and that was, you know, and what will inspire you. There's a really good movie about I think it's Mike Lee who directed it, and it's about Gilbert and Sullivan, and they want I can't remember who wrote the lyrics. I can't remember which one, but one of them is stumped. He's feeling like, I don't know what I want to do, and he goes to the Crystal Palace and sees the World Fair, and there's this Japanese tableau. This is in the middle of the 1853 or something like that. And that's the story in the film. And he is inspired to write The Mikado. And it's just like, and I always thought, like, that's so true. Like, you don't know when you walk into a place, or, you know, what's going to happen. Like, a conversation can change your life on a dime. And that's kind of what happened that day in the Glenbow, in the discovery room, with a few colors of thread and one little piece of thread. And yeah, that's why you should go to museums.
I think we have time for one more.
Can you tell us about the one drop of blood?
Yeah. No, I don't remember where it is anymore. Like, but it's there, and it's very. I blotted it up, and I did my best. But there is like a tiny little bit of stain. But when it was first shown at the Glenbow, somebody drew with pencil little penises on the first dinosaurs, and I thought, I know who did this. This is like something that like 14 to 17-year-old boys would do. I know you guys. Anyhow, they managed to get rid of that, but that was, and then I could see a few little smears. So it was, so blood. And the Bayou Tapestry, it is completely covered in all sorts of stuff, like 1,000 years old. It's been fixed and fixed and fixed, and it's so kind of like and textiles are so fragile, and that's a compelling part of our history is sort of erased because it disintegrates, and so that they're just sort of like that. That's a whole other area of interest for all sorts of archaeologists. It's like the textiles and all the materials that break down so easily. Yeah.
Please don't draw on the tapestry. And I will just add, in case Cody and Lindsay are here, we were so excited to commission touch labels from local artists as a way to channel that impulse safely. And it was something Sandra had not experienced in connection with other presentations of the show. So a first for us, a first for you. Thank you all. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Hope.
And thank you to the Levitt family, who has made this lecture possible and makes this lecture possible every year.